I'm just impressed that Martin said my name right, Cancel. That's my name. So I'm here to talk about the importance of listening to customers. One of the things that we always talk about, but few people do, right? It's one of those things that is simple, but not easy. So as Mark mentioned, I've done a whole bunch of things. I never knew that I was a product person. I always knew that I was just curious, and I always asked why. And today, I'm from the States, if you can't tell. I was in the bathroom, and I was wondering, how come there's no toilet paper roll? Why is there this tissue dispenser instead? Am I the only one who went to the bathroom? Yeah. And so, of course, these are the kind of crazy questions I would always ask myself when I would run into something new. And so I'm looking at it and thinking, is it cheaper to use tissue instead of the roll? Is that how they did it? How did they convince this place to use this kind of dispenser versus using an old-fashioned roll? And of course, I Googled it, right? So if you check my Google history, you'll see toilet paper roll versus tissue, right? And then there's searches in there. Google has some suggested searches, and it said, cheaper. And so I checked. I said, is it cheaper? It's actually not cheaper. And so then I go to Kimberly-Clark's website and try to find out, how did they actually sell this thing? What is the hook? And the hook is that it's more hygienic. So they're selling it because it's more hygienic. Anyway, I have lots of other bathroom related stories that I can share with you, but I'll just stop at that one. There's lots of them, right? So we're going to talk about why you need to listen to customers. I know that everybody here says that they do this, but very few of you actually practice it. And the answer is why we don't practice it is actually pretty simple. It has to do with balancing our ego versus being open and humble about the process. So we all know what that is. That's a chip card. Unlike in the UK, where you guys have had this for the last decade, we have just started rolling out these chip cards, or EMV cards, as they're called, EuroPay, MasterCard, Visa. I also Googled that. And in the States over the last year. And if you're from the US, you know the rollout of this thing was sold on the promise of security, right? And the result for customers looks like this. In any store you go in the US now that has, after the rollout, there's a long queue of people waiting to use their card because the processing of the chip in the US is super freaking slow, right? And there was not a mandate that everyone moved to the chip, so it was optional. And so you have to play this whack-a-mole game, and in every place you enter, is this a chip reader or is this a swipe? Is it chip or swipe? Which one is it? And every store you go into, it's a different answer, right? So what went wrong with that process? I'm sure some smart person at the credit card issuer companies and the chip machine makers obviously thought about and knew about this problem, right? But like most things, they probably had their head in the sand, right? And the businesses involved with rolling that out, the credit card issuers and the banks, weren't listening to customers or considering customers. They thought, I know the job to be done. The job to be done is people want to be able to go into a store and pay for stuff when they don't have cash. That's the job. So I know what I need to build, so I'm going to roll out these chip readers, right? Whereas they talked to actual customers, what customers wanted and prioritized 4 times more than security was speed. That's what the customer wanted. They wanted a fast process. They didn't care about security, mostly because they thought the reason that I use a credit card is to make security someone else's problem, not my problem. So, and so this is what happened, right? 10-second queues at all the places in the US, right? So like most companies and like many of you may work, and I have worked in the past, the solution was decided behind closed doors without any customer input, and this was the result. But whenever I bring up an example like this, people always jump to one favorite quote that everyone likes to pull out. Every product person likes to pull out this Henry Ford quote, right? And the quote is, if you haven't heard it a million times, it's, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses, right? And everyone points to that and says, we can't listen to customers. Customers don't know what they want. I know what they want. I know the job to be done in today's fashionable paradigm, and so I'm going to give them what they want. So in 1921, the Ford company sold more than 60% of all the cars manufactured in the US, right? 1921. But in 1927, that figure dropped to 15%. So what happened in 6 years, right? Total domination. Here's what happened, right? Ford was laser focused on creating a single product. He said, I know what they want. I know the job to be done, and that is to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, so we're going to make this Model T car. And I don't need to listen to the customer. I know exactly what they need. And we were a huge success, and we sold 60% of the cars in the US, but he stopped listening to customers, right? And although it was a huge success, he failed to meet the changing needs of the customer, right? So that opened the door for competitors, naturally, who were listening, like GM. In the 1920s, GM saw that people wanted some cars that matched their lifestyle. And instead of saying, we have the answer, which is this one model car, they actually decided to make a car for every purpose, right? So for every person, every purpose, they would have a car. Exact opposite to Ford's approach, right? And so this is what it would look like, right? We had 1 million brands that they operated, some of them competing with, all of them competing with each other, but this was their response to what they thought the customer wanted. So finally, in 1927, dwindling market share, Ford decides to shift and introduce multiple SKUs, right? And killed the Model T, which had been in production since 1908. So next time you see this quote that all PMs like to use, remember that story, right? As Patrick, as some of you may know in the product world, says, it was clear what people wanted. It wasn't faster horses. It was better cars with better financing options, right? And if Ford had been listening to his customers, he would have known that. So let's look at another example, which is totally on the opposite end, and it's with one of my favorite toys, the Lego, right? Who doesn't love Legos? In 2003, Lego lost $300 million, right? Lego, if you don't know, is the most profitable toy made, right? The highest margins ever are held by Lego. So, what was their prediction for the following year after losing $300 million? A loss of $400 million. Holy fucking shit, right? Like, right? I hope that's where this came from, right? And so, what the hell did they do, right? What led to this? And unlike Ford, who said, I know the job to be done. It is to get from point A to point B the soonest, and we will only have one model to deal with that. Lego decided to innovate. They went on the opposite side and said, we're going to innovate and create lots of SKUs. But they innovated too much, right? In the 80s and 90s, Lego replaced all of their old designers with a bunch of top designers out of all the design schools across the world, right? And these new designers took Lego in a new direction. When I grew up, Lego was just blocks and multicolored blocks, and we would create lots of crazy creations, right? But they went all the way in the opposite direction. They said, we as designers know the job to be done, and the problem we're going to solve is people want more choice, right? It was the exact opposite of the Ford example. And so where did that lead to? That led to Legos that look like this, right? That is some scary looking Legos, right? And when they did that, sales plummeted, right? And the Lego execs were confused. They said, people want more choice. Isn't that what people want? Our customers want more choice. We gave them more choice. Why are our sales plummeting, right? Finally, Lego woke up and said, we're going to ask the customers what they want, instead of sitting internally debating what they thought the customer wanted. And the Lego customers answered. The Lego customers said, we want to build. That's all we want to do. Those blocks look like the blocks that I grew up with, right? And Lego's new direction had shifted away from that. And in 2004, Lego's CEO came in and said, we're going to put the customer at the center of everything that we build at Lego going forward, right? And he put the creative control back in the hands of the customers and took it away from his internal group, the internal designers. What were the results of that? In 2010, Lego reported annual sales of $2.3 billion, profitable sales. And in 2015, $5.2 billion, right? This is why it's important to listen to customers. And I know we all say that we listen to customers, but again, very few of us actually do it because it's hard to do it. I grew up in a world, when I started writing software, in a world where we built software mostly through a waterfall process. Then we moved to an agile process. I won't go into my thoughts on agile now. That's a whole nother talk. I don't love it. And I hate it, actually. I'm known for, I hate it. I hate agile. And I hate it because it's just, okay, now I'm gonna talk about it. Yeah. Because it's just another abstraction layer, right? It's like we start to talk in like weird made-up language about points and velocity and this and that, and never do we say the word customer. Never is customer involved in the process. It's just points and this, and we did a good job. Why did we do a good job? Because my velocity chart looks like this, and it's like, who cares? Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah. All right. The UK likes rants, so I can go on rants all day. Yeah, all day. So, my approach for last decade at least has been to shift away from that waterfall and agile methodology and say, we now build software in a world where, for all of us, if you build software, you're building software that is connected to your customers, right? Through all sorts of messaging apps or all sorts of ways you can iterate with customers in real time, right? And that has shifted, that promise has shifted the world in the time that I've been involved in software, right? We've gone from a place from where I started waterfall agile. Again, I hate it. I did, for all you agile defenders, I was a signer of the Agile Manifesto, if you know what that is, a long time ago. But now I hate it. You can build software with your customers, right? And we see examples of everything being remade in this form. This is not only software, but hardware, right? If you think about Kickstarter, Indiegogo, you think about Tesla launching the Tesla 3 and selling billions of dollars of something that does not exist. We're not sure when it's going to be shipped. You cannot touch it, but people wanted to be, customers wanted to be part of that process. They wanted to be part of the narrative of building that software. So when you live in a world like this, how could you not be building software with your customers continuously, right? And the numbers look like that. If you need numbers to back it up, what you already know, right? Some of you need numbers to back up what you already know. These are the numbers, right? And so you should be working with customers in real time, right? But one pushback that I always get when I bring this up to people, they say, that's great, I love it, yeah, work with customers, and they say, but there's too much customer feedback, there's too much noise, there's too much, customers want to talk to me too much, and it's just like, that sounds like a great fucking problem, right? Like, to me, like, you have customers, they want to talk to you, that sounds awesome. But it can get overwhelming, right? So with so many people giving you suggestions about what you should do, how do you make something that's by nature qualitative into something that you could actually reduce down and understand what to do? So for years, I had been creating my own way. I just wrote this thing that was just like a simple little framework, Spotlight framework, that share with people to help them understand what to do with all of this kind of real-time feedback that you're getting from people. And all it has to do with is listening to that feedback and learning how to listen to the right parts of that feedback, right? And because most people listen to the wrong part. So there's 3 buckets of issues that I look for in feedback. User experience issues, And these are very simple, right? They're questions phrases like this. When you hear a customer say, how do I, what happens when I try to, those are pointing to user experience issues that you're having in your product. And what happens with most people, engineers and product managers, when they see feedback come in that looks like this, they ignore this part of the sentence. What they focus in on is, how do I use Slack? Oh, okay. How do I integrate XYZ? Okay, the problem is XYZ. Let's build more XYZ features. Because people just keep saying XYZ every time they call up or leave us feedback or I talk to them, right? Because we, engineers and product managers, love building new shiny shit all the time, right? So it's like, obviously, we need to build more Slack stuff because they keep saying, how do I use Slack with your product? But instead, what you should be thinking is, and focusing on is this part, which is how do I? And the reason that it's important is that the customer, if you do offer that capability that they're asking about, the customer already knows that it's possible with your product. So it's not a product marketing kind of education issue. They're not wondering if it's possible. They know it's possible. And they're saying, I know it's possible. I use your product. I tried. And I still don't know how to do it, right? So that is a user experience issue that you should look into. The second bucket of issues are product marketing issues. And those kind of look like this, right? Can you, can I, right? How do you compare to XYZ? How are you different than? What should I use you for, to do, right? Like these kind of things, again, if the subject of these sentences is something that you do, a feature that you do in your product, that's on the word, yeah. Then if it's possible in your product and they're saying things like this, these are leading towards product marketing issues. Like, why didn't they know this? Especially if they're already a customer or if they're a user who's signed up for your product and they're still asking these questions, like, how do you compare to, then you failed somewhere along the education process, whether that was like, at the website, whether that was during the onboarding process, somewhere along the line, like, you didn't educate them enough to know that, yeah, we actually do that. And then here's how we do it, or here's how we're different than this company. Then the third bucket of these things are called positioning issues, right? And these are especially useful like when you're building a new product or you're in customer development mode as a company, and you'll start to get feedback like this, like, I'm probably not your target customer, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm sure I'm wrong, but I thought. And if that person or persons, you do think that they are your persona, they are your target customer, and they're still giving you feedback like this, this is leading you to understand that you have an issue there that you need to resolve, right? And so it's very simple. This is what you can use. It's the Spotlight framework, and just like how you can bucket feedback that you're getting, user experience issues, product marketing, and positioning issues, right? Everyone's taking pictures. I should have gotten it. That's awesome. So that's the Spotlight framework, right? Remember, don't focus on the subject, focus on like what they were trying to ask you. How do I do X? Forget about X. Focus on the fact that they're saying, how do I do, right? And using a simple framework like that, you can start to bucket those things together. And the best thing about using it is, once you have a little cheat sheet like this, all you have to do is use something like, you don't need a new tool. You don't need to go, product managers, you don't need to go buy a new tool, right? Right? You don't need a replacement of Trello to do this, right? All you need to use is a simple Google spreadsheet, an Excel file, do it on paper. Just bucket these things into categories. And with your product teams, what you want to do is look at the change of those over months, right? So you want to say like, we're having these type of, in this product, we were having these type of product marketing issues or these type of user experience issues. And what you want to drive the teams to do is to start to address those issues month over month, right? You don't want those issues to continue month over month. That's how you know that you're doing progress. That's how you can help your product teams have more autonomy and decision-making power over what they work on. Because again, as companies and as product makers, we tend to focus on shiny new shit, and that's all we value, right? But if you start to look at these issues, you'll see that there might be bigger issues that you could be dealing with that are very small, minor issues in user experience, product marketing, and positioning that could lead to an amazing customer experience that is not a shiny new feature, right? In all these cases, these are features that probably already existed, right? But without a framework like this, it's easy to get lost, I get it, but you need to listen to customers, right? I'm just going to go through here. So if you don't listen to customers, this is what you're going to end up with, right? Who wants to be responsible for that, right? Right? And again, innovation is not about just big, sweeping changes, about creating new, shiny features, right? What people value is the small updates, the small fixes, and the fact that they were part of the process of making and building the product that you build, right? Being part of that journey is what people value, right? And I found that if you build a customer-driven team around this idea, and you're constantly listening, constantly updating stuff for your customers, then you start to build goodwill with them, and because you're taking action for those customers, right? And that's all that counts. Action is what counts. Like this is the framework I've used for the last 10 years and we use today at Drift. I used it in the past at HubSpot where I ran product and engineering. We did it at scale there. You can do it. We had 15,000 customers, 16,000 customers, and we had hundreds of people on the product team. We could do this every day. Most of you can do this too, right? Right? So in today's world, and this is why it's important, we believe this. Helping is the new selling and customer experience is the new marketing. That's what we, long gone are the old days of traditional marketing and selling. This is what matters. It's all about the user experience. And the good news is that everyone that's in this room can control this, right? You can control the product experience and the user experience for your customers, right? And if you fail to adapt and fail to listen to customers, then you can go back to Ford and Lego in the 20s and in the 1990s. So don't be this guy here, right? Keep your ears open, and thanks for having me.